There are about 2 billion Muslims in the world, and most of them belong to one of two main branches of Islam, Shia and Sunni. Shia Muslims primarily live in Iran, Iraq, Azerbaijan, Lebanon, and Bahrain, while Sunnis make up roughly 85 to 90% of the global Muslim population, with major communities in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. For someone unfamiliar with the faith, it can be hard to tell a Shia from a Sunni. Their core beliefs and religious practices are nearly identical. Both honor the Prophet and follow the 5 pillars of Islam. But there's one crucial difference that shapes the divide between Shia and Sunni countries: their attitude toward power and authority. That's not the first thing people usually think of when it comes to religion. When we compare, say, Catholics, Orthodox Christians, and Protestants, what comes to mind are religious distinctions: how they cross themselves, whether they use icons, or what language they pray in. But if you dig deeper, you realize religion is far more intertwined with society and the state than it might seem. Catholics have a single religious leader, while Protestants don't even have one unified church or a central authority. In that sense, they're quite similar to the Sunnis, but we'll get to that later. The key differences between Shia and Sunni Islam don't lie in theology as much as in how each tradition sees leadership and governance. And to understand how that came to be, we need to go back to the very beginning, when the worship of Allah was still a young faith, just starting its journey toward becoming the foundation of one of the great empires of the Middle Ages, the Arab Caliphate. Hi everyone, today's topic is a big one. We're going to explore how the two main branches of Islam, Shia and Sunni, came to be. It's worth saying right away that interpretations of these events often differ drastically, so I'll try to stay as neutral and careful as possible. The 7th century AD. The memory of Rome is still fresh in Europe, and most of the Mediterranean coast belongs to its direct successor, the Eastern Roman Empire, which history will later call Byzantium. The Arabian Peninsula, meanwhile, is divided among countless tribes and city-states, each with its own mix of beliefs. There are Christians, Jewish tribes, but the majority still worships an array of spirits, idols, and local gods. And as you might imagine, having many gods is rather inconvenient. You have to keep track of which one handles rain, which one protects your camels, and which one ensures your crops don't fail. So, the most logical solution in that world was to gather all these deities in one place, a kind of divine multi-tool. Long before Islam unified the region under a single monotheistic faith, Mecca was home to the Kaaba, the famous black cube that, according to legend, holds a fallen star inside. Before becoming the holiest site in Islam, Mecca was a polytheistic city, and the Kaaba housed idols of many gods. The tribe of Quraysh served as its custodians, and at the very center of the shrine stood their own deity, while the rest were placed around it, subordinate both physically and symbolically. The Quraysh didn't object when people brought more idols into the Kaaba. In fact, it reinforced their own status as the city's leading clan. That, in its own way, was an imperial gesture. We'll tolerate your gods as long as you acknowledge our authority. It was within this very tribe that Muhammad was born. According to Islamic tradition, at the age of 40, he received a revelation and took upon himself the role of Allah's final prophet, a messenger tasked with bringing the light of true faith to the world. And by world, that mainly meant the pagans and the unbelievers. While Islam, of course, had its theological disagreements with Judaism and Christianity, the Quran refers to both Jews and Christians as people of the book, followers of the same God, just not exactly following the right protocol. And that's not surprising for the early Middle Ages, when paganism hadn't yet been wiped out, and the Abrahamic religions were still forming their own distinct civilizations across the Mediterranean. For many in Egypt, Asia Minor, or North Africa, the differences between Jews and Christians weren't entirely clear. To them, both were just groups that frowned upon throwing maidens into volcanoes. Muhammad began preaching in Mecca, and at first the authorities didn't mind. until he started saying that idol worship was wrong and that it was time to remove the idols from the Kaaba. Islam also came with other unwelcome ideas, like the notion that all people were equal before Allah, even nominally, which the Quraysh elite didn't appreciate. Their response was simple: repression. So in 622, Muhammad, his followers, and their families left Mecca and migrated to Yathrib, the city that would later become known as Medina. This migration, called the Hijra, marks the beginning of Islam as a central force in Arab statehood. In fact, before the Hijra, some Muslims had already fled Mecca for Ethiopia to escape persecution. The Quraysh weren't thrilled about prophets predicting eternal damnation for them. But calling for the eviction of their gods from the Kaaba was a step too far. Medina, with its large Jewish population, was already familiar with monotheism, so Muhammad found a more receptive audience there. Though tensions existed, especially since the Jews saw his movement as an encroaching Arab phenomenon, and financial disputes, like Muhammad's rejection of interest-bearing loans, didn't help, it was still far easier to spread Islam in Medina than in deeply pagan Mecca. In Medina, Muhammad began building not just a religious movement, but a community, the Ummah, the society of all who accepted Islam. Unlike the tribal system, where identity was based on bloodline or clan, the Ummah was founded around a single person, the Prophet, and a single faith, Islam. This was a revolutionary idea: unity through belief, not ancestry. The Ummah was divided into Muhajirun, those who came from Mecca, and Ansar, those who embraced Islam in Medina. Within that, there were Mu'minun, the believers, members of the Medina community, and Muslimun, the submitted, tribes and groups that accepted Islam's authority. Not all of the latter truly converted. Many simply recognized the power of Muhammad's community. But the point is, Islam was already laying down a political and social framework rooted in faith. Muhammad was building a theocratic state, something new to Arabia, replacing old institutions with a system that was, in many ways, more progressive and stable. Of course, tribal ties didn't disappear entirely, and family connections still mattered, as we'll soon see. Over time, the Ummah grew, especially after Muhammad expelled Medina's Jewish tribes, who, though they had supported the Muslims nominally, hadn't joined their military efforts. Their land became a crucial resource for Muhammad's campaigns. And it's important to note that, unlike most religious leaders, Muhammad proved to be a gifted military and political strategist as well. Even many professional generals and politicians couldn't match his skill. Around this time, Islam became increasingly distinct from its Abrahamic cousins, Judaism and Christianity. One symbolic shift was changing the Qibla, direction of prayer, from Jerusalem to Mecca. Spiritually, it marked Islam's independence. Politically, it strengthened Muhammad's claim to his home city. Mecca, now redefined as sacred territory, was seen not as lost, but occupied. In 630, Mecca was conquered, though Muhammad wisely kept Medina as his capital to prevent the Quraysh from regaining dominance. He executed only 6 of his fiercest enemies. The rest were pardoned. Mecca accepted Islam, and the Prophet's mercy strengthened his reputation and the legitimacy of his new theocratic state. The city's status as Islam's spiritual center solidified, and though the Quraysh were now politically subordinate, they remained the custodians of Mecca, still central to the Muslim world, still profiting from pilgrimages. Muhammad's blend of faith, politics, and governance became the model for Islamic civilization. Then came 632, the Prophet's death. Many expected the Day of Judgment to follow immediately, but when it didn't, the community had to choose a successor. The problem was, no one had ever planned for this. The young theocratic state didn't yet have a system for transferring power. Old tribal customs didn't quite fit, and no new religious protocol existed. In the end, leadership passed to Muhammad's close companions, and the first to take the position was Abu Bakr, now remembered as the first rightly guided caliph. However, according to Shia belief, that decision was wrong. Abu Bakr wasn't the rightful successor. Still, historically, it's easy to see why he was chosen. He was Muhammad's senior companion, deeply respected, and made it clear he didn't claim prophetic authority, only the duty to continue the Prophet's mission. Under Abu Bakr began the early Islamic conquests, first consolidating control over tribes that had broken away after Muhammad's death, and then setting the stage for expansion into Byzantine and Sasanian lands. Ironically, those two great empires, Byzantium and Persia, had weakened each other through endless wars, leaving themselves wide open to an enemy they never expected, a new force rising from the Arabian desert under the green banner of Islam. Within just a few decades, it would reshape the entire known world. 2 years later, Abu Bakr died of illness, passing leadership to another of Muhammad's companions, Umar ibn al-Khattab, a brilliant commander and formidable leader. He expanded the caliphate even further until his life ended violently, assassinated during prayer by a Persian slave who stabbed him 6 times. The next caliph to take power was Uthman ibn Affan, a figure remembered as one of the most controversial leaders in early Islamic history, especially when it came to his handling of state finances. But we won't dwell on that. What matters here is that while his predecessor was killed by a pagan assassin, Uthman was killed in a rebellion started by Muslims themselves. His death triggered a civil war that would ultimately split Islam into 2 branches, a divide that still exists today. The new caliph was Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he deserves closer attention. As we mentioned earlier, after the Prophet Muhammad's death, it wasn't at all clear who should lead the Muslim community, or by what criteria that person should be chosen. There were 2 possible paths: follow the old tribal custom, electing the eldest and most respected, or develop a new system based on the principles of the new faith. The latter option wasn't yet obvious to anyone, so the caliphs were chosen from among Muhammad's most trusted companions. But others believed leadership should come from somewhere else, and that's where Ali comes in. He was, first, the Prophet's cousin, second, the husband of Muhammad's daughter Fatima, third, the first child to embrace Islam, and fourth, the only man ever said to have been born inside the Kaaba. That combination made many believe Ali was the rightful successor, not just to lead, but to continue Muhammad's divine mission. This distinction is crucial. Abu Bakr gained power by seniority and merit, while Ali's claim was based on bloodline, a connection to the Prophet himself. Ali's supporters became known as Ashiat Ali, the party of Ali, or simply Shiites. From their perspective, Ali was the first true rightful caliph. Those who supported Abu Bakr and the caliphs after him followed the Sunnah, the path of the Prophet, and became known as Sunnis. Once Ali came to power, he was immediately drawn into conflict, first against Aisha, the Prophet's widow, and then against Muawiyah, the governor of Syria and a member of the powerful Umayyad clan, who happened to be a relative of the slain caliph Uthman. Ali's opponents accused him of not punishing Uthman's killers severely enough. But as Ali's loyalists argued, Uthman had no rightful claim to the caliphate in the first place, so what was there to avenge? In 657, the armies of Ali and Muawiyah clashed in the Battle of Siffin, meant to be decisive, but ending in a stalemate. The 2 sides then agreed to arbitration, a seemingly progressive move for its time. But not everyone approved. 12,000 of Ali's own soldiers defected, claiming that by allowing human judges to decide the fate of the Muslim community, Ali had defied God's will. These rebels became known as Kharijites, the first major breakaway sect in Islam. Soon, Ali had to fight them too. When the Kharijites realized they couldn't win militarily, they turned to assassination, plotting to kill both Ali and Muawiyah. In the end, only Ali was killed, struck down by a Kharijite assassin during prayer. His son Hassan briefly succeeded him, but soon agreed to peacefully hand power over to Muawiyah, marking the end of the Rashidun, Rightly Guided Caliphate, and the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty. Some accounts say Muawiyah later had Hassan poisoned. Their sources differ. Either way, from that moment, the Muslim world was divided into two great branches. Those who believed that only the descendants of Ali and Fatima, the Prophet's family, could rightfully rule, and those who believed that spiritual and political authority should remain separate. The rise of the Umayyads symbolized the triumph of the second view, the Sunni perspective, across most of the caliphate. But the consequences of that divide went far beyond dynastic politics. For Shiites, political power and religious authority are inseparable. Leadership belongs to the Imam, both the spiritual and temporal head of the community. The Imam, in their belief, is divinely guided and therefore infallible. Modern Iran is the clearest example of this worldview, a Shia theocracy led by ayatollahs, who serve as both religious and political leaders. Sunnis, by contrast, see things differently. They also respect imams, but do not view them as infallible. After all, no human can be perfect in their understanding of God. Sunnis maintain a distinction between religious and secular authority. And despite common stereotypes in much of the Islamic world, historically and today, religion and state have often been separate in practice. Even during the Middle Ages, most caliphs, especially under Sunni dynasties, ruled as temporal leaders rather than divine figures. Today, Sunnis make up the majority of Muslims worldwide, but Shiites remain a significant minority. And this fundamental difference still defines much of the political and cultural landscape of the Muslim world. The two traditions have distinct ways of life, have fought wars against one another, and their interpretations of Islam continue to shape how Muslim-majority nations interact, both internally and with the outside world. I've left out many smaller theological and ritual differences between Sunnis and Shiites, because what matters most is the history, how these two paths were born, and why, centuries later, they still define the modern Middle East. Thanks for watching, and as always, new video coming soon. See you next time.